start small and measure everything. There's so many people when they're starting a business that get sort of turned one way or the other of how they should be spending their money. And if you can't measure it, you don't know what's working.
Hey everyone, this is Devin Miller here with another episode of the Inventive Journey. I'm your host, Devin Miller, the serial entrepreneur that's grown several startups into 7 and 8-figure businesses, as well as a CEO and founder of Miller IP Law, where we focus on helping startups and small businesses with their patents and trademarks. And if you ever need help with yours, just go to strategymeeting.com and grab some time with us to chat. Now, today we have another great guest on the podcast, Mickie Kennedy. And give you a quick introduction. So Mickie went to grad school for creative, I think creative writing and poetry, and then assumed that, and then I think that during part of that was waiting tables. Decided he didn't want to wait tables for forever, and definitely don't blame him. And so went to look at doing some work with big business, got into a bit of sales and marketing and PR. And then kind of from there, part of, I think, the responsibilities had was faxing, doing faxes and sending out PR releases to all the journalists and whatnot. And then he kind of saw a business opportunity there to create a list and augment that and make that a bit more automated and bring it up to date and kind of do that. So originally created that list and then brought that now online and on the internet and been doing it for 23 years or ever since. So with that much as a quick introduction, welcome on the podcast, Mickie.
Thanks. Glad to be here.
So I gave just kind of that brief introduction or brief high level overview, but now, take us a bit back in time to when you're doing grad school and doing creative arts and poetry and kind of how your journey got started from there.
Okay. So yeah, I was just assuming that I'm going to grad school for poetry. I'm going to end up waiting tables, but like I said, it's hard on your back and knees. And I tried it one summer and said, I think I would like a nice office job. So that's where I sort of transitioned into editing, and then ended up at a telecom startup. And that's where I did a little bit of everything, including sales. And then I was handling their PR as well. And we were doing faxing, and it was just brutal. It was a waste of 2 days, programming numbers into a machine and hitting send for 8 hours and waiting. So I saw more people asking if we could email the release over after we faxed it, and the light bulb went off. And I said, that's an easier way. So we launched with an email database about 23 years ago, almost. And over the years, we've continued to reach people through email, but we've been able to supplement it as well with PR Newswire. We have a relationship with them where every release that we do gets a custom national distribution with PR Newswire.
No, it definitely makes sense. Now I'm going to dive back into your journey just a bit. So going back, so you got kind of creative writing and poetry. You came out and did, for a period of time you were doing the waiting tables, kind of being the starving artist, so to speak, or the old cliche. Now, was it just as simple as, hey, I'm tired of waiting tables, so I'm going to do that, or how did you? Because you went to school, you even went to grad school and got some writing and poetry in that. Was it just simply become quickly disillusioned or decide that wasn't for you, or kind of what was the triggering point to really decide, okay, I'll go do something else and work for big business?
I really thought that waiting tables was easy, and it's not. I am the biggest tipper these days because it's hard work to be a good server. And I was just exhausted at the end of the day. I couldn't write poetry, and I was like, my mind was just mush at the end of the day. So that's what did it for me. The strange thing is, I can work in a professional environment, use some of my writing skills, and at the end of the day, I completely can disconnect and still have that creative outlet. But when I was doing something like waiting tables, I found it was just physically as well as mentally draining in a way that it isn't in a normal office environment.
So now, just maybe as a quick side note, so so you decide, okay, waiting tables is not as glamorous as you see on the show or movies, or it's not as fun to be the starving artist, so to speak, and as backbreaking type of labor, which kudos to you to at least now be the big tipper and learn, hey, if I've been there, done that, and I'll at least I'll feel for him, so to speak. But so as you did that, or kind of side question, did you continue to do your writing, do poetry, do creative writing, or did you put that aside as you kind of transitioned into a more corporate atmosphere?
I didn't initially. I wrote through graduate school, but then once I started my business full time, I put it on the back burner for like 15 years. I picked it up about 7 or 8 years ago, and I've been writing ever since. And I've started sending stuff out to small journals, getting individual poems published and stuff since then. And I feel like I have a really good balance right now between the business and the creative writing and everything like that. But the lean years, it was all the business. And if I had a spare hour, I threw it into the business. So like that's an extra blog post I could be doing. That's an extra, I used to be on bulletin boards and I'd give advice and share stuff. And so I was all about that. And I was all about the hustle in the early years.
No, it definitely makes sense. So now, so you got, you did that, and I get it, as you kind of get busy, as you get or tied up, then it's easy to kind of put that aside, and then eventually, after all these years, when you get a bit of free time, you start to pick it back up. Now, as you were doing that, so you decide, okay, I don't want to wait tables. I'll still do this you did it for a period of time, creative writing that on the side, but you start to find a job. Did you just kind of scattershot at whatever was opening, or how did you land on the job where you eventually had the light bulb moment?
Right. So I was applying for everything. The good thing is, every 4 years in DC, the environment changes politically, and a lot of people move in and out of corporate jobs because some people come to DC for a political thing and they bring a spouse and they need to work for just 4 years, but then they move back to wherever they came from. So there's a lot of cycling of professional jobs. And so I was putting my foot in a lot of doors until someone was interested. And the telecom startup, the owner of that was really taken by the fact that I was a poet. And he actually circled back and said, "Could you send me some poetry as part of the job application?" And he read it and liked it. And he said, "Oh, it reminds me of Don DeLillo." And I was like, "Oh, yes, I know. I've read Don." And so we talked a little bit about white noise. And the next thing I know, I was working there. And when I told him about the idea for sending out press releases through email, he was actually very encouraging and said, "You should work on that. And that should be something you start up." And I did. But I was also working at the startup. So it took about a year for me to contact journalists and get them to sign up to receive press releases through email.
So now one question I had kind of followed. So you originally started doing the faxing of the PR releases for another company, and then you kind of had a bit of that light bulb moment. So as you were doing that, did other people, or did you ever go and approach and see if the businesses would, that you're working for would want that, or be an opportunity? You're saying, "Hey, this is a great idea. I want to pursue it myself." And either, and then maybe you follow on to that based on your answer is, did it start out as kind of a side hustle kind of thing that I think there's some opportunities, so you kept working for them as you're cultivating that, or kind of how did that transition happen?
Well, so I started it I was also doing email newsletters, and I started the e-releases as just another email newsletter, but it was industry specific, and we would send press releases according to categories that people would sign up for. I was also I had syndicated from United Press International, like Horoscopes Today and Landers, all kinds of stuff that I was sending through email. And at one point, I had 3 email lists that had over 1 million subscribers, and we were doing movie reviews, funny, clean jokes, and the third one was trivia. And then, like shortly after the year 2000, the dot-com crash happened,
Mm.
and the advertising money just vanished for the consumer newsletters. And I was still making money with the press release, and so I just sort of pivoted and focused solely on the press release avenue of things.
No, definitely makes sense now. And I may have missed it now. I didn't catch on the early on. Were you still working for the other company? Were you still doing that
I
as you're building
did.
the
I
list?
I I planned the business for about a year, contacting journalists and getting them to sign up to the email service that I had. It was a double opt-in email service, so it was a little bit to get people to sign up. And I was still working at that business at the telecom startup for, I would say, at least a year. And it was difficult, but my lunch breaks were spent catching up on emails and customer inquiries and stuff like that. And I would get up really early at 5 o'clock in the morning and put an hour into the business before. And the volume wasn't very great. I think we did 10 to 20 press releases a month back then, so it was very manageable. Now we do sometimes 150 releases a day, so it's definitely changed.
No, definitely makes sense. And so, because it kind of, as you touched on, I would assume to build enough of that list and kind of to get that far enough along, you would need to, take some time to actually build it up, because you're not going to just be able to take all of that, get people to opt in, give them the email address and everything else. And so, definitely sounds like, as you're building it, it makes sense that you would continue to work for the other business or continue along that route. So, now you finally, you get enough of the list built up. You've been doing it. How long did you run it kind of as a side, or, how long was it before you dived in and said, okay, I can actually make money at this, make it a full-time business and support myself off of it?
Well, as soon as the consumer newsletters, the advertising disappeared, the business side of it, the e-releases was producing, I think, around 3,000 or so a month in revenue. That wasn't quite enough to live off of, but I felt like if I focused on it solely and put energy towards it, I could get it up. And so I did that and eventually got it up to close to six figures. And at that point, I kind of felt like, okay, I can now, step back from my, regular job and focus on this full time.
No, I definitely makes sense. And, that's always kind of what you're trying to balance, in the sense that as you get, kind of closer to the dock, so to speak, the boat gets closer to the dock, and saying, okay, I'm making it as much or more than I was at my full-time job, and these are coming along and I'm doing it, then I can do it full time. And and then, as you said, as you pivot, then you said, okay, now we have to adjust over to there. Now you've been doing it for 23 years. How has that evolved, or how has that gone? Has there been basically the same model, and once you got it and it worked, it's been working for 23 years? Have you updated, further pivoted, anything
It has
adjusted, or
changed.
anything else?
We rely more on sort of like industry databases to supplement now. And of course, the partnership with PR Newswire. So the Newswire distribution that people get, that's definitely been a great value add. But the actual serving of customers and walking through the process hasn't changed very much. We find that a lot of people that we work with are startups and small businesses, and they haven't really done a press release, or if they have, they've only done like a modified blog post that they send out to a free press release site that those don't really reach the media. But now they're thinking, okay, I really want to to do something serious now. So that part of it hasn't changed. It's very high touch. We're available on the phone or through chat, and people basically are they know they want to reach the media, but they're not exactly sure how it all works. So we're there for them to walk them through it. We get press releases often that are just written in the first person, and so we have to explain to them that it's supposed to be in the third person, give them models of what a press release should look like, and sort of help them through the process.
So now one question is kind of a side note, but still find it interesting. So press releases, I've been doing it for 23 years. The question would be is, for at the beginning of that, early 2000s, late 90s type of a thing, you were, that a lot of that was going to be everything from paper, newspapers, magazines, you put it in, publish it. Internet was, starting to come of age. And now you're kind of transitioning over to where everything, most things are online, most things are digital. The paper, news industry, at least on the paper side, isn't gone, but it's certainly struggling or dying out or having to adjust. And so as you do that, are press releases every bit as relevant? Are they easier or harder as you're now moving into more and more of a digital age where you have social media and podcasts, and you have, all sorts of email lists, and people are buying and selling email lists and everything else? Do people still find press releases good, or how has that evolved, and kind of where do you see the industry headed?
Well, initially, when bloggers became really big, the newswire was very hesitant about including them as media, and so y- bloggers wanted to receive press releases, and the newswires were saying no. Eventually, they opened up. Now, the newswires are very accepting of industry influencers.
Hmm.
So people who may not even have a blog or even a website, but they have an Instagram following within a certain vertical, like say fashion, for example. The newswire is very accepting of these people when they sign up now, and is actually aligning themselves with social media influencers as well. So what is a media distribution is getting a lot more broad. So they're beginning to include people who are on Twitter, Instagram, other places. So they recognize that uh, you know news coverage or having an article or a mention or something like that may not be an article in the New York Times. It may be a retweet or something from a social media influencer on Twitter. It could be
Hmm.
an Instagram post or something like that. So that's been kind of exciting to see, because the news wires were so hesitant about adopting bloggers. And I think once they got their head around the fact that there are bloggers who have a larger following and get more traffic than the industry trade publication,
Hmm.
and so once they recognize that, they've embraced everybody. And so it's been really nice to see how easy it has been for social media influencers to get access to the wire and to get press releases and things like that.
No, and that definitely makes sense. And that is interesting. Kind of you look 10 or 15 years ago, an influencer. What it you didn't know what an influencer was, at least not on social media, not on all these platforms. Same thing with the blogger. I know a lot of those have as much or more reach than some of the big newspapers, some of the big magazines, some of the big trades, and everything else. And so, it seems like that would be a natural evolution. Hey, press releases aren't just now, hey, we'll go to a trade magazine or we'll go to a trade thing, but you're going to have to, go where the audience is, so to speak. Now, if you're to look to your business specifically, now you're looking out kind of the next 6 to 12 months, how things continue to go. Kind of where do you see your business headed?
Well, I see us focusing more on strategy. I spent some time recently putting together a video training, a master class of basically 8 strategies that my successful clients use to get media coverage. I wanted to see, are there tactics or strategies that are being used that work and work time and time again? And I found several. I mean, stats and surveys, statistics work very well for the media. So if you're trying to determine what's something newsworthy I can present to the media, if you do a study, it could be a study of your own customers if it's large enough, or your user base, or you could align yourself with a trade association. A lot of small trade associations are hungry for media mentions. And so if you say, I'm doing a survey and I'm going to send the press release out to the media, could I send the survey to your members? A lot of them would say yes, as long as we can get a mention in the press release. So it's a win-win situation for both of them. And the media just eats that up quite a bit. Numbers, statistics. I always say to include a couple of playful questions, because sometimes if you get a quirky question just right, the media will love that. It's amazing how many times that quirky question can turn into the actual headline in an article that they ultimately write, because it sometimes is not the obvious questions that interest people. It's the strange one that took a little time to come up with and present to things that are going on in your industry, but maybe not on the front level.
No, it definitely makes perfect sense. So, and it sounds like a fun heck or direction to continue to be headed in. Well, as we start to wrap up with the podcast a bit, I always ask 2 questions at the end, so we'll go ahead and jump to those now. So, the first question I always ask is: along your journey, what was the worst business decision you ever made, and what did you learn from it?
Let's see. My worst business decision was not reading what I'm signing. I have signed a couple of contracts over the years, and been told later that yes, it was a 1-year contract, but there was an auto renewal clause in there, and
Mm.
you needed to let us know 90 days before it expired. Otherwise, it automatically renewed, and that cost me like I think $15,000. So that hurt at a time when $15,000 was a lot of money to the business. So I definitely pay attention to what I sign, and I think that also goes to business practices as well. I want to make sure that I don't ever do something like that, and that's why I like to work a la carte, press release by press release basis without a long-term contract or commitment.
No, and I think that, that's one where as funny as it, it seems like, yeah, oh, you should definitely read a legal contract. You're signing, and yet most of the time you're saying, oh man, this is half the time. It's a lot of pages. It's legal jargon. It's hard to understand. It's hard to follow. You think, oh, I'll never need to worry about it. We have a good relationship. I just excited to get going. And so it's one that's easy to overlook or otherwise, just want to sign it or get started or not have to worry about it. And then you sign it, and then at some point you're saying, wait a minute, what did I agree to, or how does that work, or anything else? And so I definitely make sense as to how it's easy for, because if you were to think of even how often do people read their cell phone contract or their lease agreement or anything else, and they're saying, oh, just give it to me, I just want to sign on the dotted line. And yet if you're not careful, especially in the business arena, you can have those that come back and can have major drawbacks. So I think that that's an easy mistake to make, but also a good one to learn from. So now the second question is um, if you're talking to somebody that's just getting into a startup or a small business, what'd be the one piece of advice you'd give them?
I say, start small and measure everything. There's so many people when they're starting a business that get sort of turned one way or the other of how they should be spending their money. And if you can't measure it, you don't know what's working. And, in my day, there was a point where I was advertising across 40 city yellow pages under public relations. It was tens of thousands of dollars. And I just assumed it was working. And then someone said, you can use a tracking phone number and determine what kind of traffic you're getting from these yellow page ads. And as soon as I measured it, I realized I was getting like 14 calls a year. I was spending thousands of dollars per phone call. And,
Mm.
when I canceled the contract, the person was like really surprised. And they said, how do you know it's not working? And I said, well, those numbers I put in last year were tracking numbers. And they just went, ooh, because they are this, they're used to people who just renew year after year because they don't know their numbers and they don't know how to track stuff. So I would urge people to track as much as you can, and make sure it's statistically relevant. Like if you're doing a press release campaign, make sure you're doing a series of like 6 or more press releases in order to determine if PR will work for you or not. But just like when you do a Google Ads campaign, you don't judge it based on like 30 clicks. You have to get a few hundred clicks in order to determine if you have a statistical relevance there.
No, and I definitely agree. And that was even one that, even with my law firm, we've tried out several different things as far as how to advertise, reach the market, and do different things. We looked at whether it's radio ads or we looked at, and whether it's billboards. And some of the gripes I always had with those is, oftentimes they're set up, well, yeah, you just put it up there. And of course it will, people will see it. It'll have a return. And you're saying, yeah, but I don't know what that is. And so you can get more astute now and you can just, you get it to a certain number that tracks how many calls you get. You route it to a different way, or that's a lot of times when you say pound blah blah blah, pound 250 with the keyword this, and that's how they're tracking it. Because if you can get statistically or significant numbers, you can figure out, does this make sense? Am I getting a return, or am I just dumping a whole bunch of money into a place that doesn't make sense? And I think having that level of focus or making figuring out your return can make or save you from wasting a lot of money and give you a lot better returns on areas that you could invest it much better in. So I think that definitely is a great piece of advice. Well, as people want to reach out to, they want to find out more, they want to use you for press releases, or they want to be a client, a customer, they want to be an employee, they want to be an investor, they want to be your next best friend, any or all of the above, what's the best way to reach out to you or find out more?
Okay, so just visit ereleases.com, and in the footer, there's a link to free PR strategy training. That's that class that I talked about, the master class. It's an hour-long video training, and if you take that, you'll know more about PR strategy and press releases than I guarantee you 80% of PR firms that are out there. And you can do this yourself. You can figure out based on that whether you feel you're up to it, and to consider whether press releases will work for you or not.
Awesome. Well, I think it sounds like a great resource, and I definitely encourage everybody to check it out and try it out and figure out how to be or to make see if press releases work for you, and if they do, definitely utilize that as a tool in your toolbox. Well, thank you again, Mickie, for coming on. It's been fun. It's been a pleasure. And I wish you the next leg of your journey even better than the last. Now, for all of you that are listeners, if you have your own journey to tell, definitely feel free to go to inventiveguest.com and apply to be on the podcast, as we'd love to share your journey and hear about or how you got to where you're at today. Also, as a listener, two more things. One, make sure to click subscribe in your podcast player so you know when all of our awesome episodes come out, and two, leave us a review so new people can find out about us. Last but not least, if you ever need help with your patents, trademarks, or anything else, feel free to reach out to us by going to strategymeeting.com. Sign up for some time to chat. Well, thank you again, Mickie. It's been fun and a pleasure, and wish the next leg of your journey even better than the last.
Thank you.